Good day, students, and welcome to the world of science. I'm Sir Mars Francis Emilgar, your science teacher for today. For today's topic, we're going to discuss about the plate boundaries. For our objectives, we have identify and describe the different types of plate boundaries. If we recall the last video, we discovered that the lithosphere is divided into what we call the tectonic plates. We have the major plates, which is the African, Antarctic, Eurasian, Indo-Australian, North American, Pacific, and the South American. We also have the much smaller plates we call the minor plates, naming the Arabian, Caribbean, Cocos, Juan de Fuca, Indian, Nazca, Philippine, Scotia, and Somali. Last time, we have a question that what happens in the boundary between the tectonic plates? The answer? We have three types of plate boundaries. In each boundary, there is a unique happening between the tectonic plates. The first one, we have the convergent plate boundary. Next is the divergent plate boundary. Last is the transform plate boundary. So what happens in these three types of boundaries? Let's start with the convergent plate boundary. Convergent boundaries are where the plates move towards each other. It means the two tectonic plates are colliding on one another. The force that moves this type of boundary is what we call compression force. We have three types of convergent boundaries. We have the continent-continent collision, the continent-oceanic collision, and the ocean-ocean collision. For the continent-continent collision, it forms mountains. The best example for this is the European Alps or the Himalayas. The European Alps or the Himalayas is formed during the collision between the Indian plate and the Eurasian plate. The next one is the continent-oceanic collision. The oceanic crust, which is thinner and more dense or heavier than the continental crust, sinks below the continental crust. This type of boundary is the cause for the formation of volcanoes. The last one is the ocean-ocean collision. This is the collision between two oceanic crusts, and one run over the other, which causes it to sink into the mantle, forming a subduction zone. The best example for this is trenches. Ocean-ocean collision forms a very deep depression in the ocean, and that's what we call trench. The best example is the deepest part of the ocean that we call Marianas Trench. The next type of boundary is what we call the divergent boundary. It exists between two tectonic plates that are moving away from each other. The force that causes this type of boundary is what we call tension force. The plates are moving away from each other. The best example for this type of boundary is the spreading ridges. Now, as the plates move apart, new material is erupted to fill the gap. So it means, when two tectonic plates are moving away from each other, it doesn't create a hole, but instead, new material from the mantle goes up. This diagram shows the age of the oceanic crust. The red one means the crust is still young, and the green one means the crust is really old. As you can see, when the crust is near a boundary, it is young, and when it's away the boundary, it is old. It's a proof that this type of boundary releases new type of material as two tectonic plates move away from each other. Another example is the situation in Iceland. Iceland is found between the boundary of the North American plate and the Eurasian plate. As you can see, the Iceland has numerous amount of active volcanoes because it is found on a divergent boundary. Last type of plate boundary is the transform boundary. A transform boundary is where the plates slide past each other. The force in charge of this type of boundary is what we call the shearing force. The best example for this is the San Andreas Fault. Transform boundaries are found in areas where earthquakes are very common. Now, let's try if we can identify what type of boundary is between the tectonic plates on Earth. Let's try. The first one is the African and Australian plate. I'll give you time. The answer is divergent. As you can see in the arrow, the South American plate is moving to the left and the African plate is moving to the right, making them move away from each other, making them a divergent plate boundary. Next example, we have the Indian and Eurasian plate. The answer is convergent. If we observe, the Indian plate and the Eurasian plate are moving towards each other, causing a collision. The boundary is what we call a convergent plate boundary. Next is the North American and the Pacific plate. The answer is, it's a transform. As you can see, the boundary between the Pacific plate and the North American plate is sliding past each other, making them a transform plate boundary. Now to summarize, we have three types of plate boundary. We have convergent, divergent, and transform. That's all for today. Thank you for watching and kindly like the video and comment if there are any questions. Again, thank you and have a nice day.